we're a procurement source for the industry's XR hardware. So if a company is looking to stand up a new tool in their organization, and let's say they want to deploy about 1,000 devices, it's a good example, but they need it to go to 18 different physical locations. They have 7 different pieces of software, some that they've built in-house, some that they purchase off the shelf. They need device management. They need barcodes and stickers and things to label the device, to brand it, to make it ready for IT to manage. They need custom cases so that they're easy to travel with and they're protected from damage in transit. They need somebody to really think about all these nuanced details where all of the friction points can lie when you're deploying some kind of a new tool, especially at scale. We made the strategic point early on to focus on hardware, on the solutions that can be provided around hardware, and creating strategic partnerships with software vendors out there in the market, because we wanted to be able to service the entirety of the B2B market for XR. We meet the customers where they are, and we find out what their journey is and what their path to success is. And we help them realize those goals and provide, a decade's worth of consultative experience and knowledge to help ensure that they're not buying 10 headsets today and then never again. It's really a goal of, how do I see where you are in 5 years, buying 10,000 headsets, deploying them in unique and novel ways. Because one of the things I like to say is, you couldn't invent Uber until there was a smartphone in every pocket, right?
I met a Rick!
Welcome back to another episode of Meta Rick, where we talk with business leaders, with founders, with creative technologists about XR technologies and 3D world building. Today we have Josh Bankston. Josh has been around the industry for quite a long time. I see him at every event that I go to. He's out here connecting dots, bringing people together, and he brings such an incredibly positive energy to the space. I've been wanting to have him on the show for quite some time, for about 2 years now. I think I've been excited to bring you on. Josh, before we get into talking about the industry and speculating about XR, maybe tell us a little bit about how you started your career. Like what brought you into the XR space?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. As we've talked over the years about opportunities to kind of take our candid conversations that we've had at all these events and, might as well have them recorded and shared with other folks that are interested and like-minded. So I have been a technologist my whole life. Pretty much started crawling with technology around me. And I had a pivotal moment where I needed to move back to Texas to help my mom because she got breast cancer. And I had built a consultancy at the time. And when I moved states, to come back to my hometown, I recognized that I wanted to make a pivot into something that would be next gen, would be bleeding edge, would be something I could really sink my teeth into rather than just run-of-the-mill computers. And so that was right 2013 timeframe, and we got into Oculus DK1, got into the local community. A good friend of mine, Eric Liga, was helping to push Houston VR in the Houston space, showcase the latest of what was happening. And that started this trend of me looking for opportunities to attend events, talks, conferences, you name it, and digest more, learn more, and then be able to share that knowledge back to a community and help folks grow with what's possible of this really amazing technology we work in.
What was your first VR experience? So you mentioned the DK1, which is very common. I feel like most of the people I talk to on the show, it's either the DK1 or it's some form of 360 video on a Google Cardboard or something. But
right,
for you, what was the earliest experience you could remember?
That I can remember. Um, to be honest, it's hard for me to recall exactly what the first experience was because it was in some kind of a Houston VR or SVVR setting where we were doing a bunch of rapid fire demos. I can tell you one of the first I did for a business. I helped set up an arcade with DK1s and doing an escape room. Early on, it was by some uh, Eastern European country that built a bunch of titles overnight when they saw the opportunity with VR. And so having to try to configure and cobble together all of the kind of Frankenstein equipment at the time with the cameras and tracking and all of that to get a room with 6 different players. It was seated at the time because of the base, like early VR, right? A lot of it the thought was it was going to be, you're going to use a game controller or something like that. The Oculus didn't even come with the hand tracking controllers to begin with, right? And then it just kind of grew from there. I did a lot with South by Southwest and their immersive, their XR cinema. So I found a lot of early storytelling experiences very compelling and a way to expand what it means to showcase a narrative to an audience. And sometimes you have an audience singled out as an individual. Sometimes you have a wide audience of many people experiencing something. Sometimes it's all at the same time, sometimes asynchronous. And then it's those nuanced details as I started to grow with what I was either experiencing or a part of that started to really click with me that this is going to take a monumental lift from a business perspective of how do I take an idea or an ideal and bring it to market effectively, following some of the same paradigms as other businesses before it, but also realizing at the same time that it's going to be a pivotal shift at a foundational level for a lot of go-to-market strategies.
I think at the early days, like I like that you highlighted this point that the DK1 didn't even come with hand tracking controllers, right? Because for a lot of us, like for me, I think my first experience was the Oculus Rift, and then it was still a little too early for me with it being tethered to a gaming PC. There's still a little too much friction. I hopped in at the MetaQuest 1. That's where it was a no-brainer for me. I was like, it's all in one device, controllers packaged. I can install games from my phone. Easy decision. I just pulled the trigger and kind of jumped in. But with the DK1 back then, I mean, just that simple fact that you didn't even have the hand tracking controllers yet, I think that highlights how much more limited it was and the types of experiences you could actually create were almost purely just visual.
Right.
That visual forward, and then everything else was a layer on with additional hardware or additional costs. And that's where you start getting into XR caves and things like that, where it was really, really expensive, but really cool. When you first entered the space, there's such a variety of skill sets that come in, right? There's some very technical skills, some very creative skills. I pride myself on bringing a little bit more of a business mind to the space and more of like a biz dev marketing kind of approach. When you came in, what were the skill sets that you were really focused on? Was it more kind of technical building? Was it more creative design? Was it more business operations? Like where do you see the skill sets you had at the beginning, and then maybe how they've evolved over the years as you've been in the space a little longer?
It's a good question. So before I jumped kind of both feet into VR, I mentioned I had built an independent consultancy, so helping small businesses and individuals with their tech needs, just day-to-day maintenance and identifying the right equipment, the right level of investment, and managing funds that way. So I did a lot of break fix. I did a lot of just general IT skills, and I rolled in those IT skills as a necessary base level tech knowledge for VR to help intrinsically understand what XR was or just VR at the time, and how it could be applied to the same settings that I was already supporting. And then as those businesses evolved and changed and adapted to the VR landscape, I acquired their knowledge through trials and tribulations of consulting with them and helping them directly, and use kind of an aggregate knowledge base at that point to build and amplify what's possible for the rest of my customers. So it's kind of this feedback loop of learn, do, grow, learn, do, grow.
Did you essentially loop virtual reality in as another service offering under that kind of consultancy? So you were kind of providing general advice and feedback on IT implementation.
Certainly before MACE was founded, right? So I had this gap from 2013 to 2017, 2018, when MACE officially got together. So I just was kind of independent, trying to find a way to put immersive technology at the forefront of the offerings, which is today also what MACE does, right? We focus entirely on that XR hardware and solutions stack. We're not really applying smart fridges or washing machines or other appliances or even just basic, like we're not focused on iPads or other technology that's necessarily in the sphere unless it pertains specifically to the implementation of XR. So if you have a cinema of 70 people that are all in headsets and you need to control them through an iPad, absolutely. We'll talk about integration and how that works and how the workflow gets implemented. But we're not going to market to see how many iPads we can sell. We're looking at how many devices are going to be immersive in some way, how that brings access to digital data and experiences, both bringing the human in and bringing the data out, right? And trying to realize goals in unique and novel ways that, again, find the good levels of ROI that you try to achieve going into any project, but also find scalability. Because when we're talking about these early days of VR, we had a lot of what we called VR for PR, right? Companies would buy a bunch of headsets and say, oh yeah, we're a VR company now. Just like probably today, anybody looking around, oh yeah, we're an AI company. But that's not really being a good steward of investment. It's not being a good shepherd of what the eventual journey will be. That's just trying to make a quick buck. And even then, early on, we knew it's a marathon race. We're going to take our time. We're going to do things the right way. And we spent a lot of time, actually, both independently and with MACE. We spent a lot of time telling people, no, this is not the right time. This is not the right product. This is not what you want to invest in. These are not the droids you're looking for. Because we didn't want somebody investing $100, $1,000, $10,000, $50, $100,000, whatever it might have been at the time, in products that weren't a good fit with what their solution was that they're trying to achieve. Because ultimately, if somebody buys a headset and then never uses it, did they ever really invest in the market, or did they just buy a trinket that became a doorway? So
there's a lot of interesting points in there that I want to circle back to in just a second. But
sure.
First, I want to give a foundation for MACE. So I think we have a little bit of the story arc of kind of what you were doing before and this kind of merger between IT services and virtual reality. And then you mentioned this kind of pivot point where MACE kind of fully took over into the VR side and away from some of these other technical implementations you could have been working on. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved with MACE. And I mean, as a reminder for folks, if you haven't heard of MACE before, it's essentially it's called MACE Virtual Labs. It's Houston-based, and they provide turnkey enterprise solutions around virtual reality and XR technologies. That can be from the advice and the thought leadership on just how to execute on those programs, all the way down to the access to the specific devices and hardware needed. But obviously, I think, Josh, you've got a lot more insight than I do into it. Maybe you could share little of how that story started for you and a little bit about the services your team provides.
Yeah, happy to. MACE got started. I have my two business partners, Chad Modet and Edgar Acosta, formed the business as the two co-founders late 2017. Chad at the time had a side business as a VR arcade. He had Omni treadmills and other VR attractions. And there, to make a really long story somewhat contracted, there was opportunities for others to come and check out the equipment and potentially invest in the equipment themselves, purchase devices or build a business around it, etc. Mace was around for a couple months. They quickly figured out that they needed somebody with technical skills, with boots on the ground capabilities, the willingness to travel to anywhere in North America, build facilities, get them set up, and support their efforts. And so I got brought on board. I was already working in the area. We already knew about each other because we had met at the Houston VR Meetup scene. And so I came on board basically as a tech. And then as the company grew, and also as my presence at conferences and events and giving talks and lectures and things, I just became more of an integral role in the tech and services deployment of what MACE does. And so you hit on some of the finer points of what MACE is, right? We're a procurement source for the industry's XR hardware. So if a company is looking to stand up a new tool in their organization, and let's say they want to deploy about 1,000 devices, it's a good example, but they need it to go to 18 different physical locations. They have 7 different pieces of software, some that they've built in-house, some that they purchase off the shelf. They need device management. They need barcodes and stickers and things to label the device, to brand it, to make it ready for IT to manage. They need custom cases so that they're easy to travel with and they're protected from damage in transit. They need somebody to really think about all these nuanced details where all of the friction points can lie when you're deploying some kind of a new tool, especially at scale. They'll come to us, right? We will work with them to solve all of those little individual problems as one turnkey solution. Or maybe they just want to buy some MetaQuest 3s, or maybe they, just need some clean boxes or storage and charging cabinets because they've already sourced their fleet of equipment. Or maybe they need somebody to come on site and help them understand how to re-provision a fleet of devices to get more life out of them. We made the strategic point early on to focus on hardware, on the solutions that can be provided around hardware, and creating strategic partnerships with software vendors out there in the market, because we wanted to be able to service the entirety of the B2B market for XR, because the XR in general is kind of a niche market, right? So it's achievable, but you can't do everything, which is what every startup begins with. And let's boil the ocean, to use a fun corporate term. But I'm really happy that we focused entirely on just hardware and solutions in that realm, because what it means is we're just a strategic value add to every software vendor out there, because we eliminate the need for worrying about how do we get hardware into the hands of my customers. And then also from a standpoint of a customer end user, we're, more or less agnostic but opinionated. We're not going to, when you come into the dealership and you say, I really want, an F-250 pickup truck because I got to haul horses and I got to do these things, we're not going to be like, well, we only sell Miatas here, and I think you would look great in this little tiny coupe. I know you want to haul horses, but maybe we'll string together 2 Miatas next to each other, and that'll be able to pull the horse. No, we meet the customers where they are, and we find out what their journey is and what their path to success is, and we help them realize those goals and provide, a decade's worth of consultative experience and knowledge to help ensure that they're not buying 10 headsets today and then never again. It's really a goal of, how do I see where you are in 5 years, buying 10,000 headsets, deploying them in unique and novel ways. Because like one of the things I like to say is, right, you couldn't invent Uber until there was a smartphone in every pocket, right? You couldn't have some of these solutions until you had market penetration. And there's a lot of unique and novel solutions in business and enterprise, government, medical, education, et cetera, that haven't even been realized yet, because we're still at the end of the beginning when it comes to VR. There's still this thought that it's kind of a nascent field, that we're still got to build momentum, we still got to have more market penetration, but we're starting to see the evolution of these things in the, there are organizations deploying tens of thousands of units. And what will that bring us, right? How will that bring about change, and who's going to have some kind of, I really wish I could just call a taxi no matter where I was in the world, and I'm going to create this app, I'm going to call it Uber, and give people the ability to be their own taxi cab service. I'm not sure what that novel solution will be, but I know without a shadow of a doubt that as more of these devices find their ways and into organizations and find homes at business level, we will see some really cool changes and shifts because of these new technologies that get built for it.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation where,
of course,
everyone's looking for that killer app that's going to make everyone go out and buy more headsets, but there's also a lot of app ideas that require people to have headsets. So it's like, if you think about social VR use cases, for example, where you've got multiple users that need to work together to achieve something, if they already have devices, that reduces the friction drastically for them to hop into those experiences together, versus if for the first time you need to set up the devices and the hardware. And to some of the points you brought up earlier, that it's more than just buying a device. If you're an enterprise company and you want to buy 100 devices or 1,000 devices or more, there's also these onboarding steps of, okay, now that you've picked the device and the cost per unit, like you also have to think about device management. You have to think about the shipping logistics. Are these going to be shared devices in an office? Are these going to be in 18 different offices? Are they going to be one-to-one with each employee, like a laptop might be?
Right.
I was talking to Peter Smolovic's a while back, and they have certain programs that actually do BYOD, bring your own device, where it's a little bit of, okay, some use cases don't require the same privacy standards and certifications as other use cases. So maybe if your kid has a headset, you can still participate in some of the more team building type exercises without us buying you one. And so there's a range of complexity here where having partners that have been there before can be proactive with you, help you address concerns earlier in the process, help you avoid concerns, help you troubleshoot is incredibly valuable. When you're working with these customers, I'm guessing the first few customers might have come from the arcade back in the day, where it's people stumbling in and sharing an idea for a use case. Funny enough, you're maybe the fourth or fifth person that's told me that's how it started. These local kind of clubs almost that turned into something bigger. But now, where would you say most of your customers are coming from at the moment? Is it inbound traffic? Is it through go-to-market partners? Do you guys have your own outbound strategy or paid ads or something? Or how does a typical lead or conversation with a customer start?
Yeah, that's a great question. Back in the day, certainly there was a healthy amount of drop-ins that were at an event or whatever that brought them to that question of how do I do the same thing, right? And there's still this concept, I think, of the physical place of showcasing the equipment, right? I always say that it's like trying to explain what it's like to ride a roller coaster if you've never been on one. If I can't put you in a headset, if I can't put you on a treadmill or in a motion platform or using the actual tool in practice, there's only so much that you're going to understand, that you're going to grok it, right? Like there's a substantial gap, because immersive technology is about that next step, bringing the digital space, breaking that fourth wall between you and that digital space in many ways. And so when we talk to a customer, they come from a lot of different places. We certainly invest in LinkedIn and Google for marketing purposes. We do some thought leadership. We will do webinars and seminars with our partners that speak to these specific markets. Like you said at the top of the show, you see me at just about every event out there that I can find time for. And then I also have a team of folks that, the sales folks and whatnot, will attend events as well. There are specific venues that businesses will attend and look for these kind of serendipitous moments and ways to have a live dialogue without having to go through the kind of courting or song and dance of, do I want to work with you? Do you want to work with me? And do we meet in the middle? And how does all that work? And then through our partners, again, what I said earlier about where we sit and who we represent, we're kind of this hub and spoke of the whole XR hardware market. And a lot of our partners rely on channel sales and channel solutions that go beyond first party responsibility to provide value to the customers. Sometimes an OEM, equipment manufacturer like Magic Leap, doesn't sell direct at all. They only sell through channel partners and distribution. Sometimes there's a company like Vuzix, who we're the master distributor for. So we have a lot of stocking inventory, and then any sales that go through distribution or resellers or any of that goes through MACE as a supply chain manager. So it really depends on the solution, the go-to-market strategy of the OEM or the software vendor, and how we're partnering together to bring that holistic solution. And again, it could be as simple as, a few years back, Pico said, we want you to take over all of our North American distribution. We're like, okay, great, we'll do that. So every sale, every business investing in Pico at the time, we had units on the shelf, we did fulfillment, and if you wanted extra services, extra accessories, etc., we could offer it, or you could just buy just a Pico, right? Then there's, like I said, there's the thought leadership, and then there's working directly hand in hand with partners, like go-to-market strategies with new services like Quest for Business, right? How do companies understand, they've deployed 20,000 units on Arbor XR, and now they're considering going Quest for Business because of one reason or another, or vice versa, really. We work hand in hand with that partner to help the customer field their questions, and then also have kind of a third-party question and answer about how it works in practice. How does it look like from outside of the first-party mothership, so to speak, and what are the realistic pain points they might have to deal with, and how do they overcome them? Can MACE shoulder some of that burden? Can we find somebody else to help realize that these are things that we're going to have to be mindful over the next year of growth? It's really, this is such a complex industry with so many moving parts. I feel privileged that we've focused on one subset of the entire equation. And because we continue to provide so much value and help end users grow their deployment, we've had year over year growth with our partners, building lead flow, building opportunities together, that we just keep finding those win-win moments.
Something that I find really interesting about businesses like MACE that have been around for, I think it's 6-7 years, so something along those lines. You've been through at least two, maybe three hype cycles since the business started, right? There's these hype cycles that are getting more and more compressed, where everyone who works in this industry, whether that be a software developer, a service provider, a hardware distributor especially, is reliant on the innovation that the hardware manufacturers can put, right? Like how much better these headsets get continues to unlock things for all of the rest of the ecosystem. And I think there's a few key checkpoints there, everyone talks about the DK1. That was a huge moment where people forget VR has actually been around for decades, and small versions and experiments of it for hundreds of years, honestly. But the DK1 was like a pivotal moment of like people understanding this is real, this could really be incredibly valuable. And then mobile devices like the Quest 1 being able to be wireless and be able to sync to a mobile device or a marketplace to be able to access content was another huge checkpoint. And HTC had its own version of that. And I think now we're seeing another evolution of this with companies like Apple and Lenovo and Microsoft all coming in and entering that hardware race. And so through those hype cycles, I imagine there's been a pretty big shift in customer behavior. I bet you at the very beginning of that, the majority of your customers were probably first-time VR users, or maybe they wanted to buy 5-10 headsets to start experimenting and piloting things, and probably didn't know a whole lot of what they were going to use with it. It was probably more exploration, maybe some hard skills training and design prototyping or whatever. But now I wonder if that's changed. Like, would you say today it's still mostly piloting and experimentation, or are you starting to see a lot more maturity coming from these programs? And I wonder how the user behavior, the customer behavior might have changed over the last 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. Early on, a lot of conversations, like I said earlier, about no, it's not the right time. No, let's rethink your problem that you're trying to solve, and let's find a better fit, a better solution. In a lot of businesses, especially verticals like energy, right? No one wants to be first. It's a race to second or third. They want to see the solution out there in the field. They want to see proof positive even in a competitor, so that they can come behind and say, well, we're going to do a better implementation. We're going to take lessons learned from the market, and we're going to outpace them because we're going to take what they're showcasing and we're going to leapfrog, right? But I truly believe what my friend Javier Fadul at HTX says, the end of the beginning for VR. What that means to me is the proof is positive, right? The innovation labs have done their job. The research is published. There's obvious showcases where this technology greatly impacts training, data retention, lowers overall risk. A lot of these huge overhanging looming problems that businesses face day to day. And so now that we're starting to see deployment in the 5 digits of devices per organization, we're starting to see a lot of companies formulate the same strategy. Instead of saying, well, how do I give champion A big enough budget to build an innovation lab? They're instead saying, well, how do we empower my entire HR business vertical? Or how do I change my warehousing and manufacturing vertical to implement this technology in novel ways that makes us adopt the competitive edge that we're already seeing our competitors having in the market today around us? How do we get news coverage based on how we're being innovative and going beyond? Because we're past that time frame where saying, oh, I built a new R&D lab where I put a Quest 3 and an XR Elite and a Pico 4E together, and I called it an innovation lab. But that's not going to get the attention it used to, right? It used to be like you put 20 DK2s in a lab with some ultra leap motions at the time, now ultra leap. Everybody was on board. A school here bought 20 Tesla suits, and that was all over, right? You have to have implementation now. But focusing on that part of the equation moves us down the road towards a more evolved and more curated journey.
What is one of the most, like, you don't have to say a specific client, but I'm curious, what does the most mature VR program look like? Like out of the, because you work with a lot of folks, and some of
Sure.
them are probably pretty entry level, some of them are probably further along. Some of the defining characteristics of like who's doing it really, really well right now?
I think it's really easy to get lost in the mix of like, talk to me about your visuals, or how many polygons do you have in an experience? What is, how many times do you hit latency thresholds? Drilling down and being hyper focused on how do I as a individual experience this one application and this one implementation. But from my perspective, what really stands out in the sense of maturity and a company that is ready to run the marathon along with us is, do they have business acumen? do they understand what it takes to price a product? Do they know what it means to go to their specific market and be able to iterate and pivot along with changes that you have to be adaptable to in this ever-changing landscape? What strategies do you have in place if your product is no longer, if the hardware is no longer available? Are you planning on growing into an international company? What does it mean if I want to sell my product to a company or an individual in Argentina? What are the pitfalls? Are you even considering these things? Or are you just seeing the opportunity to take a technology and make money off of it? There's this concept of like, it's a cool, shiny toy to a lot of people, but really it's just a fundamental tool. And when you're a carpenter building houses, you don't rely on just one hammer, or oftentimes you don't. Certainly you could get the job done with the same tool over and over again, but you're going to find different applications for different variations of that tool. And if that tool comes with a high price tag that you can't afford, then you might not choose it. Or it takes, a 6-week course and certification before you can ever use the smart hammer, you might not use it. Or do you have somebody that you can work hand in hand with and say, these are the things I'm trying to accomplish as a carpenter. These are the kind of hammers that I've used. Do you have any new things that we can implement? And having that advice and the peers and the structure in your business and your go-to-market strategy with building more than one house to be able to accomplish that task over and over and over again and grow as a company.
Yeah, so I think I agree with this. So you're speaking more on the vendor side, like if you're building VR software or services, and in order to be a mature vendor, it's not just about the quality of the experience and the technology, but it's actually bigger than that. It's more about what's your buying process? Like, how do you actually work with these companies? If you're going to say you're B2B and enterprise focused, do you actually understand the enterprise landscape? Are you prepared to answer a 150-page questionnaire about your IT and your architecture?
And an 18-month sales cycle, and somebody wanting to have net 90 terms, and what does that do to your P&L? And there's all sorts of things. And then even on the some of that still applies to the end user, right? Like in business, it's not traditional for the sales structure to go, well, it's just Ricky, and he just wants a headset, and he's just going to buy a headset, and then that's it for the rest of time. It's typical of saying there's a couple of devices that are needed, a couple of solutions that are going to be there today, but there's got to be a strategy of doing something with them going forward. Again, otherwise they turn into just dust magnets and sit in a storage shelf.
So this actually sparks a question that I think in your experience would be in a good position to answer this. So with headsets, we talked earlier about the hype cycles, how those hype cycles are shortening. I think at one point it was you get a new headset every 5 years, then it was every 3, now it's every 2. That's just shrinking more and more. Eventually, it's sad to think about, but in 10, 15 years, it might look like the iPhone where every new announcement has a tiny little feature update or a little thing. This new one,
It's the best one this year.
this
It is
one
the best one that you have to
happened
buy.
to be very relevant to us, right? For those who haven't seen Apple's Glow event, capturing spatial video and spatial photo is now much easier to do on the iPhone 16, which is great for the VR world. But overall, it's like usually some kind of camera update or small OS update. But for the most part, the phones look exactly the same. Maybe the screen gets a little bit bigger or something. And I think with VR headsets, we'll reach that point. Eventually, there's going to be a plateau in device innovation. And each year, it's going to be more about the apps we build for the devices instead of the devices themselves.
Right.
But that's not how it is right now. Right now, the devices change drastically. You get huge leaps in what they're capable of doing. Just thinking the Quest 2 and Quest 3, the pass-through mixed reality of the Quest 3, the lightweightness, like there's a huge evolution between those two. So if I'm a big company and I'm about to buy 10,000 devices and scale a huge VR program, if I know that those devices are going to upgrade in a year or in 2 years and I'm already going to be a little bit behind, how do you handle that hesitation from a company? Like, what would be your advice for them if they're worried about buying devices that then fall out of being the most updated devices?
What are we solving? Is it a problem in manufacturing that a 3D model and design review doesn't happen effectively enough? And so you get to production and you get 300 devices in on a 1 million unit production order, and you realize this widget is 6 inches too far out of reach. What is that going to cost you? Is that going to be $25 million in retooling? Well, yeah, buying 10,000 units of headsets to avoid not just that one implementation and that one problem that potentially was going to hit you for 25 million, but each subsequent one, that's an easy no-brainer. That's a case that could be made to the CFO, to the CTO, all the key decision makers all the way down.
Yeah, it's like if you think about if you're buying 15 devices for a team and it could solve a problem like that saves the company millions of dollars to avoid that issue or to reduce timelines to get the project done faster or whatever the ROI would be in that use case. There's plenty of examples of it. Well, if that's true for that team of 10, the reason you're buying 10,000 is because it's also true for another 100 teams, right? So I think that's a really good answer. It's like if you're going to solve this problem in one place, if you can solve those problems at scale, then the ROI is actually even better. It's not worse.
And there's also this concept of having access to the tools today allows me to roadmap tomorrow. If I don't have access to the tools, or if my teams don't have access to those tools, then they're going in blind when the roadmap hits the intersection where we have to consider it. So if you don't at least have some kind of tech market penetration into your organization of what these devices and tools do, then you're letting your competition outpace you, and you're also creating kind of a backlog of not ignorance, but just being unaware of how to take these tools and make them applicable to what you're doing.
Yeah, it creates like a lack of domain knowledge, right?
Right.
It's like you want to be ahead of the curve, or at least on par at a bare minimum, right? And I think we're very quickly reaching a point now where these headsets are selling in large quantities, right? Like even right now, while it still feels early, it still feels like it's not ubiquitous. Everyone's still wondering what's the killer app going to be. You still got over 20 million Quest devices floating around, and that's just one of the companies in the space. So
right.
There's a huge growth happening, and I don't know about you, but I definitely feel this kind of as the end of 2024 starts coming upon us here, that there's a huge uptick right now in interest and excitement, even at AWE this year. Typically, I see AWE almost more like an XR family reunion. It's a lot more partner focused. It's learning best practices from friends in the space. It's a good chance to catch up with people like you. It's a great time, and there's a lot of learnings. But this year was different. This year was meeting with a bunch of brands back to back almost every day. a lot of these guys came in to check on what's the progress that's being made on the space. There was a lot of curiosity from real buyers at a pretty niche industry event. And so the behavior is changing, and I can feel that. I want to pivot the conversation a little bit because Josh, I said at the beginning, like you're this magical connector. You're like the wizard of bringing people together in this industry. And every event I go to, I see at least 2 or 3 moments minimum of you pulling a guy aside and saying, "Hey, you need to meet this other person," with no benefit to yourself. Like them meeting, connecting, them finding an opportunity together does not tie back to your success or revenue for your company or referral fee. It's just out of the excitement and the goodness of your heart and wanting more people building faster and getting cool things done in the space. And I love that about you, and I want to learn from it. So is there anything that you do to prepare for going into an event? Is there anything that you think about that might be a nice tip or trick that you could share on how to bring people together?
I think the event that I think it was originally Oculus Connect that really opened me to this concept of just being ready for serendipity. And then I think I grew that skill set an order of magnitude by focusing on South by Southwest. South by, with I think the peak attendance was like 425,000 people. It takes over the entirety of downtown Austin. And it's one of those things that I realized that I could spend a month preparing for meetings I want to have, events I want to be at, build an entire custom calendar and lay out everything perfectly. And then I would get to the morning of the first day and everything would skew. Because I would run into somebody, I would run into you, and we'd have this amazing conversation about something that you're passionate about. And, the synapses would fire, and I would say, "Oh, well, you really need to talk to Ricky Holm at Chocolate Milk and Donuts, because the last time I was talking to him, he was building an experience that was exactly what you're trying to accomplish." And in an effort of trying to help the industry not reinvent the wheel, but find those moments to connect, is it might not intrinsically benefit me. It might not put dollars in my pocket or into the coffers of MACE that I work at day to day. But it pays off me as a person. It makes me, it satisfies like the core essence of who Josh is, because I believe that hoarded knowledge is wasted knowledge. And the ability to have a great conversation amongst like-minded peers and individuals in that moment of time is the realization of one of the best things it is to be human. And to find these moments of others that are just as passionate as I am in the industry that we're working in. And if I can be just even a quarter of a tenth of a percentile influential in helping somebody realize their goals, I find an immense benefit in that myself. And then it also creates a pathway for us to get to know each other, to be colleagues, to become peers, or grow from that and become friends and talk in a conversation in a setting like this and be like, "Oh yeah, you remember 2 years ago when we were in the old AWE conference center and we had these conversations, and this thing happened, and they brought together a self-made floating platform for flying in VR, and then I wrote on it once, and then somebody wrote on it right after me, and then it broke and fell apart on the floor. But everybody was like, okay, well, now how do we take this lesson? How do we learn from it, build it into a better product?" And then there's all of a sudden a spurious conversation of just how do we take this to market together? And no one in that conversation was the person that was the product owner. It was just everybody was passionate about bringing this new concept in front of new novel markets, in front of new opportunities to find itself and to unlock capabilities for the masses. it's a new industry. It's a new technology. It's going to take a lot of innovation and collaboration. And the innovation is there. And so I just seek to try to be a collaborator. And if I have access to somebody and we can make that moment happen, especially if we're both there together, it breaks down walls. And I've seen, like you said, multiple times that ROI hits for the folks that I help make intros for. So I will, as long as I have the ability to do so, I will never stop doing that.
Have you always been this way? Is that like a trait like well before the XR industry, right? Like as a kid or in college or early life, like have you always had that kind of wanting to connect people type energy?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with grew up with two younger brothers, older half brother, half sister that didn't live in the house with us. And then was a latchkey kid. I grew up in a time and place before all of this, and so I was always out in the neighborhood, meeting with other, you know, rapscallions and coming up with new fun things to do. And then as I grew into adulthood and being a technologist and trying to be a part of these things, I'm an avid gamer my whole life. I was part of a bunch of clans and guilds, and I was a competitive Counter-Strike player for a few years. I played EverQuest and World of Warcraft. I did a lot of stuff. It's always been very community driven, and I'm just excited to be able to take that same mindset of how can I build cohort groups, build community, and realize opportunity to grow together in this business space, because it it is transformative. I mean, I truly believe that the work that we do, if not directly, indirectly, can not just better people's lives, but it can help save people's lives. And to be able to rest my head on my pillow every night and think that that's a part of what I do day to day, that makes it all worth the stress and the struggle.
What's your favorite question to ask someone that you've never met before?
Oh, uh, I'm notorious for asking folks if they have used immersive tech, and then uh, oftentimes they'll come back and say no, and I'll find ways to make it relevant. One of the skill sets I've prided myself on building over the years is taking the nonsense and making it make sense, using analogies and similes and anecdotal data to bring some of this ephemeral stuff and a bunch of the nuanced details of very niche solutions and bringing it home to the individual's perspective, because perspective is the key to life, right? So if I can help you grow or shift or adapt the perspective that you have to better align with what I'm trying to convey as far as the information, um, then it's not me telling you how to perceive it or find the innovation that's important to you. You now get it, and then you run with it. Because I'm more excited to see what you as an individual can come up with as the really cool idea and the next big app or whatever it gets that makes you excited. Um, and talking about XR is a great launching point. I mean, I've helped more than 10,000 people through their first XR experiences. So I've gotten to go through these motions and hear these stories, and it's never the two are the same. It's always an interesting conversation, and it's a great way to get into what's coming next.
I think that's one of the most wonderful things about the technology we get to work on is if you think about what virtual reality really is, even augmented reality as well, it's a medium of communication. It's a way to tell stories, and it's an incredibly emotional, impactful way to tell stories where you can make someone feel a certain thing and resonate with what the idea you're trying to share instantly. It takes show don't tell to like an entirely new level, right? And so I completely agree with you. I think there's something about giving someone a taste of the experience and then empowering them to run with their imagination. There's infinite use cases and ways of using this. It's as as ubiquitous, if not more so, than like video or photo content. The idea of 3D world building literally is infinite with what you can do with it. It's just a matter of giving people a good starting line, and then they'll help us figure out where the finish line is at some point.
I mean, Charlie Fink wrote a book called Convergence, who kind of got the conversation started for me about this concept of what's going to happen in the next couple of years. You've got, 6G data speeds. You've got terabit data speeds going across the wire. You've got further shrinking technology, ever improving battery technology. You've got AI. I mean, look at the work that Game Engine did, where they let you play Doom without any game engine at all. It was all just rendered frame by frame by an AI. We're getting very closely to a place where humanity will have a tool that allows them to create at the speed of imagination.
Oh my goodness, there's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Where my head goes with that is as generative AI gets better, and as we give more access to our own information to it, like with things like Apple Intelligence, for example, like if an AI has access to everything about me and it remembers it all better than I do, so it knows my spending history, it knows my relationships, it knows how I communicate, it knows my search history, it knows everything about me, then its ability to then generate a song that's perfect for how I feel right now, for the activity I'm doing right now. I almost think that referencing a catalog of music I've heard before will become less meaningful and less normal. I think there might be a future state where art just becomes so incredibly fluid and individualized and personal in that way that it kind of generates to the user in the moment. There's a lot of downsides to that too, though. I think there's a shared community aspect of going to a concert and seeing that band that we love and attaching it to memories. And there's other pieces of value we don't want to let go of. But again, I think we could talk about that for probably 2 or 3 hours in itself.
Yeah, of course.
As we get to time here, Josh, is there anything that you want to plug, anything you're working on? Where can people find you? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, you can usually find me at VR conferences. I wish I was better at social media. LinkedIn's probably the one I use the most.
Josh always has a super cool fedora, and as you can tell, he's got the killer stash of beer.
Yeah, I'm a unique individual in the crowd for sure. And I have long hair that I grow out to donate. No, I just think we hit on some really great subjects, and if there are any businesses out there that are struggling with scalability, if there's anybody that has questions on taking their solution to market, how do I find a hardware partner? How do I find a procurement partner, logistics partner, those kinds of things? How do I brand something? How do I customize something? We've done it. We've not just done it, we've done it tens of thousands of times. So don't reinvent the wheel. Let's do it together, and let's do some really cool stuff, because there is nothing but new opportunities on the horizon. There's still a ton of green field to attack, and I can't wait to do it together.
Amazing. Definitely hit Josh and MACE Labs up. We're going to have the link down in the description so it's easy to find, but otherwise that's the pod.
I met a